Greetings, hello, and welcome to everyone. Good to be back up here in the auditorium. If you missed last week, we were downstairs in the fellowship hall downstairs. We had converted this whole room into sort of a indoor festival center with a big bounce house right here. So all the chairs were out. Now we have a slightly new arrangement of the chairs back up here this morning. I personally really like this a lot. And I hope most of you are jealous of me for sitting over here, because the whole time I was sitting straight across from George Stegerda. And all I do is look at him, and he looks at me the whole time. And I know when you go to church, you're supposed to expect to see and experience God, but I've been staring at the glory of the Lord the whole time. So it's been a good morning for me. So thank you, George. So this is the third installment, and probably the last, in our series on eldership. And we have more to come with deacons as well. But this is all in service of, with a view to adding to our number of elders and deacons at the Holland Church of Christ. So we'll probably complete our series. We'll be talking about that, see if there's anything else that needs to be said. But maybe this will be the last one here, and then we'll begin the process of looking into more elders with our congregation here. But if you did miss it, it would be worth your while, I think, to go back and see the other two. I think the video from last week is maybe available. I don't remember. I don't know. Maybe not. You can speak with Bradley privately on that, and he'll give you a copy. But the original one about elderhood in general, which I think was the most applicable, is definitely on our YouTube channel, the Holland Church of Christ YouTube channel. I think that's really important so that all of us have a sense of what eldership is, not church eldership, but elderhood in general in the rest of life. It's something that we can all aspire to do and to be. Last week we looked at what I consider to be the main criteria for eldership in a church. So we've taken from the pool of elders or elders in training that are out here in our midst, and we say, you are going to be also a church elder. And I think that the main criteria for a church elder is the good shepherd, the great shepherd, God himself. So we looked at that last week, looked at Psalm 23, Ezekiel 34, John chapter 10, talking about the characteristics and qualities of God as the great shepherd, and how as elders we're called to imitate God to the best of our ability. So that's worth your while too. If you don't get to hear this sermon, you can at least go and read those texts in Psalm 23 and Ezekiel 34 and John 10, and just see who God is, who Jesus is as the good shepherd. And today we're going to go to the text that we all anticipate, maybe not anticipate, but at least expect in the pastoral epistles, namely 1 Timothy. This is the classic text, the one that most people go to first when we talk about elders. I save it for last on purpose, because I think the stuff from last week is more essential and crucial to eldership, but this is important as well. And so we're going to talk about 1 Timothy chapter 3. That will be our foundation text, but we're going to keep in mind that 2 Timothy and Titus both also have something to say about elders. And there's another chapter in 1 Timothy chapter 5 that also says something about elders, but we're going to go through chapter 3 here. Now, I, a while back, mentioned that I received some minor crack on the windshield of my car. And I made a prediction back then that those kinds of things don't fix themselves or get better over time. In fact, they start to get worse over time if unaddressed. And true to that prediction, and by the way, that was based on other people. I didn't make that up myself. That's just seems to be what happens with windshields and other things in life. But what started as, I think we measured it. I don't remember what the original measurement was. It wasn't much. We keep measuring it over time. It kept getting bigger and bigger, longer and longer. And then the other day, I was picking my kids up from school. I think Josiah was in the front seat. All of a sudden, there was this great exclamation from the passenger seat. Dad, look at the windshield. And the line, you could just see it moving across the windshield as we were driving. And now it's pretty much all the way across. Now things have gotten out of hand, and now it's time to really address the problem. It's time to fix, really replace the windshield. It's getting out of hand, and it's getting to be dangerous, unsafe. I think that's kind of a good metaphor, illustration for what's going on in the churches that we have here in the pastoral epistles, as they're called, the church in Ephesus and the church in Crete. Crete's like the huge island down in the sea south of Ephesus. And Timothy is there at Ephesus, the church in Ephesus, and Titus is there at the church in Crete. And they both have a similar problem. They both, in their context, in their church context, have this crack in the windshield that's been getting progressively worse over time. And at first it was tolerable, and you pay attention to it and make sure it doesn't get out of hand. But at some point, it shoots all the way across the windshield, and it's time to address the situation. It's getting dangerous. That's what's happening in the churches here. And so when you read the pastoral epistles, you'll see immediately there is an occasion here, and it's not a good one, why these letters are being written. There are what commentators will call the opponents. And these are sort of traveling missionaries that have gone around, the same way that Paul goes around and does stuff. But their message, and in particular their ethics, are totally antithetical to Paul's gospel, to the way that these churches have been founded and are expected to grow and mature in Christ, in the Spirit. And so that's the problem. The opponents have come through, and yeah, there's always opponents. There's always weird teachings out there. There's always weird fringe ethics for how to live life. And, some people do it, and most people don't. But this has become out of control. Now it's having a very large influence, a large grip on these churches. And that's what the pastoral epistles are about. And one of the ways the opponents are going to be addressed, one of the ways that teaching and that way of life is going to be addressed is via leadership. That's part of the occasion why elders or overseers are going to be installed, put in place in this church because of the situation. There's leaders in the church. It's unclear if there already are elders or not, but this situation has taken hold because whatever leaders have been in place, despite Timothy or Titus, this has infiltrated the church, and it's out of control, and it's unsafe. And so now there's going to be new or different or additional elders and deacons and other things that are needed here to address this situation. And the opponents here, the thing is that it's really difficult to understand what exactly the opponents are teaching. This isn't a treatise. It doesn't. The author doesn't say, by the way, here's the bullet points of what this teaching is, and here's what they say, and here's what they do, because everyone who's reading this already knows. You don't have to tell them. So it's written to them, not to us. I mean, we have to try to figure out what's going on here, and we piece it together based on little clues here and there in the text. So nobody knows exactly what the opponents are teaching and doing, but you can gather in the text that it's an offshoot of Judaism, something related to a Jewish way of approaching the scriptures, or a subset of Judaism that involves Jewish myths. It involves Jewish laws. These opponents are encouraging ascetic practices, and those are for reasons of ritual purity. They will go to the extreme measures of forbidding people to get married, because they think that is wrong and it's better to not be married. Permanent abstinence from certain foods, not allowed to eat this or that. There's also, if not Gnosticism, a little something that's similar to it. Gnosticism just means like it has to do with the word for knowing. A Gnostic is someone who has secret, special spiritual knowledge that's elite and better than what you are. That's a Gnostic. Okay, so there's a little bit maybe of that in here, so that the people would say, well, the only true way to know God is through accepting what we teach and what we practice, doing what we practice. And also, importantly, and you know this hits Paul hard, the opponents have said that the resurrection already happened. It's already occurred. The resurrection is in the past. We talk about it in the past tense and that sort of thing. So that's a big one. Those are the basics. There's some other stuff you can kind of guess about, but that's kind of the basic thing that's happening here. And so in that context, we have letters like 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy and Titus. And so as we look at the text here, we'll see that there's instructions for Timothy to have overseers. And what is an overseer? So I'm going to go through the text. I also have some PowerPoint slides here. So let me just read the text first, the first 7 verses, and then we'll do the PowerPoint. So 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7. It's a trustworthy statement. If any man aspires to the office of overseer, the same thing as an elder, it is a fine work that he desires to do. An overseer then must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, prudent, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not addicted to wine. Sorry, I lost my spot here. Not pugnacious, but gentle, peaceable, free from the love of money. He must be one who manages his own household well, keeping his children under control with all dignity. But if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how will he take care of the church of God? Must not be a new convert, so that he will not become conceited and fall into the condemnation incurred by the devil. He must have a good reputation with those outside the church, so that he will not fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Okay, so that's the list here. There's another one in chapter 5. There's more in other parts of the pastoral epistles. We're just going to focus on this one right now so that it's not a 7-hour sermon. But let's ask the question, why this list? What's going on here? We already have a perfectly good qualifications and qualities and characteristics and a model for what an elder is. If you want an overseer, if you want an elder, just start quoting Psalm 23 or Ezekiel 34 or John chapter 10 or whatever, right? Why does it list these things here? And what I would like to show today is that this list here, just like the rest of the pastorals, are important because they're addressing a certain situation in a certain context. Now, ideally, there would be a panel discussion up here, not just me. I feel bad about just me being the speaker today because there's more than one view on this text. This is a very difficult text. All of the pastorals are famously difficult to interpret, to apply, all of that. So I'm representing one view here. It would be better if we could have everyone, multiple views represented at the same time. So if you happen to disagree with one or part or all of what I say today, I totally get it. Maybe I'll disagree with myself next year. I don't know, but that's okay. There are different views on this text. So I'm gonna talk about one, not just different views on what each of the words mean in technical discussions about the elders or the deacons or the women stuff, but just in general, how do we apply this text? Here we have a list. What are we supposed to do with that list? Okay, so this is my take on it, and so we have 1 Timothy 3. I also have some PowerPoint here if you want to take a look at this. This is actually more of an illustration. This one, I think, probably the number 3 or 4 or 2 best commentary is by William Mounts. in the Word Biblical Commentary series, his commentary on the Pastoral epistles. And what he does is he inserts a chart in his commentary on this part of the text. And I found it to be really, really helpful to understand what's going on here. Why are we saying these particular things about elders? So we can go now. First of all, annoying and way too much information and Greek stuff. Second of all, blurry. I get it. But this is just to have as an illustration. You don't have to study and memorize. I just want you to focus on the far left column and the far right column. The far left one is our Timothy text. The far right one describes the opponents that are being addressed in the pastoral epistles. And what you'll see is a lot of the time, and the third column, it talks about the elders in the Titus text. The second one is deacons. So don't worry about those for now. But time after time, you'll see that the descriptions of the overseers or the elders in 1 Timothy chapter 3 or 1 Timothy chapter 5 have a direct correlation to what's going on with the opponents in Ephesus or at Crete. There's a correlation here that is important that Mounts tries to point out. And if not correlating with the overseers, then it will correlate with the elders in Titus or the deacons in 1 Timothy. So there's a reason why we're talking about these things, and it's because the opponents do the opposite. So, for instance, the very first thing that we see is that elders aspire to a good work or a noble task. I think we said the other week. Okay, and we see in Titus a mention of the opponents who are worthless when it comes to any sort of good work or task. Okay. Number 2 here, an elder and overseer should be above reproach. We saw that word in 1 Timothy 3 here. A good reputation with outsiders in chapter 5. And that's because the opponents have, according to Titus 1, have brought reproach on the church. And also this word reproach gives us a really good description of their overall general activities of what they're doing, okay? I'm going to pause there just to say reproach and above reproach, this thing here is the main point. What the goal is for installing these leaders is because of the topic and the issue of reproach. It's bookending this section. It's the first thing, and the title, the marquee statement about elders here in verse 2, and it also bookends at the end here in verse 7. An elder must have a good reputation. That's at the end of the section here in chapter 7. So that bookends the whole discussion. And most commentators point out that if this is sort of the title, good reproach. And what does that mean? Here's some things that means. And the rest of the list is about what it means to be a person above reproach. I don't know if I've been saying good reproach, but I meant to say above reproach. Above reproach. Good reputation, in other words. Okay? So the thing that's being addressed here is our church, our congregation in Ephesus or Crete, is starting to get a bad reputation in the community because of the things that the opponents are doing, and that is ruining our witness, our testimony in the community. It's maligning, it's bringing reproach upon the name of Christ, the name of Jesus in the community in which we serve. That's what these opponents are doing. It's not just affecting the people in our church, it's affecting the people outside of our church and our witness, which is in our testimony and our ministry, our mission. That's the most important thing. So we're getting leaders who, above all else, are going to be focused on that reputation, that witness to outsiders, okay? Also, they're going to address the theology and ethics of the opponents, but this is the main thing, reproach, above reproach, a good reputation. Secondly, what is the famous text, the one-woman man, often translated husband of one wife, and that goes straight across the board here. And these people, the opponents, obviously don't agree with the one woman, one wife stuff. They don't agree with marriage at all. They're against it. They forbid marriage. So, and they possibly forbid childbearing, and also they like to seduce women. Okay, so there's a correlation between being a one-woman man, which essentially is about faithfulness, right? Is this person about faithfulness and commitment, versus the opponents who don't like the institution, don't like the children that come from it, and would rather seduce women instead of be faithful to them. Okay, so there's a huge difference between the opponents and the people that are being described as good leaders above reproach here. Clear-minded, that is temperate in my translation. These people need to be able to think clearly. Prudent or self-controlled. We have record of the opponents being described as uncontrolled, the exact opposite of this word. So rather than having people out of control, we need leaders who are in control. And then the dignified at the bottom there, respectful is how my translation says it. Respectful, modest, dignified. There is no dignity in the opponents, but okay. So next slide is hospitable. This has to do with what you do with your home and use it as a place for ministry and love and service and grace and that sort of thing. These opponents sneak and worm and slither their way into the houses of the innocent and the naive and the weak, and they take advantage of those people in more ways than one. So it's like the antithesis of hospitality. They're not using their home to be ministers of grace and that sort of thing. They are worming their way into other people's homes to take advantage of them. So it's the exact opposite of that. An elder or an overseer, skilled in teaching, there is at the end of verse 2. Skilled in teaching. Now this is a major category. One of the main problems with these people is their teaching. That's what's influencing and affecting. So teaching is a really, really big deal when it comes to elders in Ephesus and Crete. So able to teach, skilled in teaching. We have the opponents who are teaching a different gospel. They want to be teachers of the law, but they don't know what they're talking about. They're false teachers. They're devoted to teachings of demons, not the teachings of God, that sort of thing. Okay. I'm not going to go through the rest. We can look at them, but the chart keeps going here, and then the next page chart keeps going here, and then the next page, and then the next page is the last one. So it keeps going. Okay, I just want you to see that parallel, that there's an occasional correlation between why the elders need to be this and why and that's related to the opponents and who and what they are. Okay, so we don't need the PowerPoint anymore. But the list goes on here. Verse 4, or verse 3, not addicted to wine, not pugnacious, as my translation has the word, but gentle and peaceable, free from the love of money. Not addicted to wine, I think that's self-explanatory. We need someone who doesn't have an addiction to wine, but can be sober and able to do the job. Not pugnacious, not violent, not a bully. Those are alternate translations here. Is their reaction, their response to any situation violence? Do they have a violent approach to things? Doesn't mean physical violence necessarily, but is there bullying? Is it my way or the highway? Is it pushing people around? Or is it the opposite of that? Gentle, gracious, forbearing. And the next word, peaceable, not quarrelsome is a way you could translate that. Not a brawler, you could translate that. And free from the love of money. Free from the love of money means that there's no motivation. If we were looking at the chart, we'd see love of money is a big issue, big motivation for the opponents. They are making money off of this, this false teaching, this influential teaching that causes people to practice certain ethics and morals that are unhealthy, that sort of thing. Free from the love of money. And then he must be one who manages his own household well, verse 4, keeping his children under control with all dignity. tons of discussion there. Who's the dignified one? Is it the child? Is it the father of the household? I think that's probably the father. So you could translate as manages his household well with dignity, keeping his children under control or under submission. That's another thing that the opponents produce in kids is rebellion and hostility and chaos and that sort of thing. So the leader is one who does the opposite of that. Verse 5, if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how will he take care of the church of God? So household management is a big deal. That's a great testing spot for whether or not this person can be a overseer or shepherd in the church here in Ephesus or Crete. In households, as you know, we're not just like the mom and the kids. The household was a bigger enterprise. There was tons of people involved that in what is with the word household, right? There's not just your wife and your kids, but there's other people involved in making this operation work. So you're managing that whole enterprise. And verse 6, not a new convert, so that he will not become conceited and fall into the condemnation incurred by the devil. Then that's interesting motivation, isn't it? So that he will not become conceited. Not a new convert, so that he will not be. I mean, new convert, obviously, you're going to want to make sure they know what they're doing. So not a new convert, right? When I lived in Texas and I was going to a seminary, my roommate and I, we were looking around for a church, and we found one that we wanted to go to, and we walked up and talked to one of the leaders, and they're like, hey, how are you guys? And we're like, oh, we want to serve. We want to help out in your church. And he's like, okay, hold on. Who are these guys? Like, they want to know. They don't just say, oh, great, come on in. Do whatever you want. You want to know who someone is first, not a new convert. That makes sense to me. But also not a new convert because they might become conceited and fall into the condemnation incurred by the devil. It's interesting. So when you get too much power too quickly, there's a risk that can corrupt you. There has to be a really good foundation of humility, not pride here in the leadership. And verse 7, it must have a good reputation, back to the reputation, with those outside the church so that they will not fall into the reproach and snare of the devil. Lots of interpretive stuff there as well. But good reputation is there at the beginning, there at the end. This has been a long sermon. This has been a long series. Thank you very much. You could tell there's so much more that I'm not saying, and there's plenty more to study here. I want to encourage you to study this stuff on your own. There's tons of stuff to study and read about the pastoral epistles, and I want to encourage you to look into that on your own as we continue on in this process. But here's my take on the application of the text. There's a critical issue here, and critical issues call for certain characteristics. Could just as easily have given the list of Psalm 23, Ezekiel 34, John 10, and said, all right, we need these people. I think those are a given. I think the people in this context know what elders are, but they need specific things for specific situations that arise. And over and above all, the most important thing to Paul or to Timothy or to Titus is the gospel and the reputation and the witness of the church in a community. That's how a church stands or falls. Are they in good standing, good reputation in the community, or do people look at that and be like, oh, okay, we don't want any part, we don't want anything to do with that. So, good reputation above reproach. I think that's the main headline of what an elder is, because that gives us the best chance of having a good reputation in the community. So number one, when I'm looking for an elder, I want to say who represents the church well, who gives us a good reputation in the community. And number two, and finally, I ask who is equipped to lead wisely and faithfully in light of our current issues and crises that we face today as a culture, as a community, as a church family. There's always going to be crises. There's always going to be issues that we face. And I think it's important to think of leaders as those who are equipped to lead us through and beyond those things wisely and faithfully? Who is equipped to lead us wisely and faithfully in light of our current issues and crises? Who is equipped to see us through these days? That's what leaders are for. That's what elders are for. They see us through and walk us through these days, shepherd us through these moments, these issues, these crises that we face today. So keep all that in mind as we prayerfully move on in this process of considering new elders and new deacons. Let's stand and sing.